And we are live! Greetings, salutations, and of course, welcome to, well, I always say this, but a very special interview. And my goodness, I'm not kidding. Today we have the Anna Blackwell. Anna, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. That intro
Well,
was epic.
right.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun making all of those explosions go off. Not gonna lie, there's nothing like a good bois to
Yeah.
get the heart pumping and yeah, get ready for a great live stream. Anna, where are you calling in from today?
Glasgow in Scotland, where it's currently 0 degrees.
That's my least favorite number of degrees. That sounds really cold. What do you do
Yep.
to keep warm up in Glasgow?
Hoodies, scarves, heating on.
And of course, playing solo RPGs. Nothing keeps
Yeah.
you cozier.
And looking at the nice fake fire around here to imagine that I'm warm.
Yes, for those of you listening from the future in the podcast, our background right now, because we're still celebrating World Ember, is the flames of the forge. So we are enjoying the figurative heat of the last ebbs of World Ember, I suppose. I mentioned solo RPGs. Solo RPGs really is the name of the game that we are chatting about today. But before I get ahead of myself, let me introduce my very eminent and wonderful guest, who's far too modest to introduce herself. Anna Blackwell is the creative mind behind the hit solo RPGs Delve and Apothecaria. She freelances for Tabletop Gaming Magazine and for every other tabletop related magazine in the UK because she is that awesome. And when she's not making games, she's writing her first novel or training for the circus. Okay, so quick segue about that. In 1 minute or not or less, training for the circus, I must know.
Yeah. There's a company called Aerial Edge in Glasgow. It's basically a bunch of circus classes. I do trapeze, silks, Chinese pole, acrobalance, acrobatics. I've did the month-long intensive course last year, and my goal for the end of this year is to hopefully try and get a performance put together for the stage at some point.
Oh my goodness, a woman of many parts. Ah, Anna Blackwell, that is so exciting.
Thank you.
I can already see so much love. Astra Necrolith says Apothecaria is amazing. I'm also looking forward to trying for small creatures such as We, which is Anna's upcoming RPG. I just need to clear some of my other solo RPG backlog first. Just
I
too
feel
much,
you.
too many wonderful things to explore. What a burden
Yep.
we have. So, for those of you sitting there thinking, well, this all seems very nice and Anna seems lovely, but what is a solo RPG? Well, let's start with the basics, Anna. Tell us, what is a solo RPG?
A solo RPG is a role playing game that you play by yourself. It can take so many different forms. For people who are familiar with like Apothecaria or Ironsworn or Thousand Year Old Vampire, these are journaling RPGs. So you're writing the story as you play. But then you get other ones like My Delve, which is a drawing RPG that you play by yourself. There's other ones where you are creating maps, you're creating like physical artifacts. It takes on so many different forms.
I've seen one where you start with a deck of cards, and in order to summon demons, you
Yep.
wreck. It's called wreck the deck, right? Where you wreck
Yeah.
all of the cards to create magical effects in the world as a game.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I would love to play that, but my partner is a magician, like in training, so like she would go crazy if I ruined her decks.
Right, sacrilegious.
Yeah.
No wrecking the decks in your house. I've seen some with Jenga as well. Is that right?
Yes. I actually want to try and use Jenga for something, but like the main kind of big one that I know of is the Wretched, and that put forward the Wretched and Alone, like where loads of people started making their own versions. It's so tense. It's wonderful. The Jenga tower adds so much to the tension of those games.
Amazing. And so what we're looking at here essentially, it's an RPG where there's no game master. There's no like game master player division. It's just you and a book or a
Mhm.
digital book, right? And it guides you through a story and gives you that kind of freedom that an RPG has. Is that correct?
Yeah. You are
Really
both
cool.
the writer, the GM, and the player. It's great.
Amazing. So I'm sure that my chat can weigh in on this as well. But why are solo RPGs awesome? What's the draw? Why not just sit around the table with your friends and play a traditional Pathfinder you know, Call of Cthulhu style game. Why a solo RPG?
The same reason you used in the tagline, scheduling is a nightmare. How, like, we just finished our big multiplayer campaign in November, and we haven't been able to sit down for another session since. I know I've got friends who haven't been able to sit down for years because they can't get people to organize. So it's a great way to just play these games by yourself, go explore, do the things you want to do around the table, but can't convince your working friends to do.
I've
And
seen.
because there's a incredible kind of emotional aspect to it, like you can explore things that are on the edge of what you're comfortable with in a safe environment, and also that maybe you're embarrassed to bring up with other people.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of solo RPGs that are deeply emotional. A lot of them about self-discovery, about very personal
Hmm.
journeys. I think these are things that it's wonderful to explore in a somewhat gamified environment because that gives you a structure and yet a freedom. But having that privacy around it is kind of wonderful too,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Um, I guess the other thing that solo RPGs are great for is if you travel a lot, because they're very travel friendly, most of
Oh
them,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Hmm.
Like I
Most of
can.
them. Like I've got Iron Sworn beside me, and I don't know if I travel with that. It's a bit
Do you wanna
chunky.
show us for those
Yeah.
of us
So
on the watching on
yeah,
the
Iron
stream?
Sworn Starforged, like that's a bit big. And the
So,
fantasy one of that's 2 books now.
oh
Iron
goodness.
Sworn and Iron Sworn Delve, so that's like twice as big.
So Anna's just shown me, for those on the podcast, a book that's about an inch thick, 2.5 centimeters thick there.
Yep.
Um, Korrigath says, I do Ironstone via PDF. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that. I can see that, Korrigath. Good shout. Shadow Phoenix says, why is it awesome? I have to deal with people enough on a daily basis. Solo RPGs allow me to wander in my bubble without causing someone else to destroy it. Looking
Yeah.
at you, my dear players.
Yeah. And that's like the other thing. If you're the like forever GM, it gives you a chance to make a world and not let the players ruin it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, sometimes you just want to have fun where you don't feel responsible for other people's fun. I guess
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
don't know if anybody else recognizes this, but often when I'm playing at a table, I'm a bit of a people pleaser. So when I'm playing at a table, whether I'm the GM or a player, I want to make sure everyone else is having fun. I
Hmm.
don't want to make choices that are going to jeopardize somebody else's fun. Like, if there's an interaction going on and I suddenly get, you know, possessed by the Zoomies demon, I don't want to go and do something that's going to be inappropriate for the table, even if I'm sitting there being like, I wonder what would happen if I licked this NPC right now. Like that's not appropriate in a game when other people are playing. I get that.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that you can indulge in yourself, right?
Oh.
My community knows that I am famous for trying to lick a god in one of my RPGs that I played. My husband has never forgiven me, so I am occasionally possessed by the Zoomies demon. I do occasionally try to do these things, and within the bounds of solo RPG, that is absolutely fine.
Yeah. It's when you
Lee
try to lick the GM that's when it crosses some boundaries.
well, the GM is my husband, so I get him out there.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yes, in
Yeah.
general,
Fair.
second as everyone says, you lick one god and dot dot dot. I know, right?
Right.
Story of my life.
Mm.
Lee Step says so much less social anxiety or show baiting, co-players hogging the limelight, etc. All of those potential issues at the table, they go away for a solo RPG.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's just nice to have some alone time,
Yeah.
That's great too. Um, so we've touched on this a little bit already, but what different kinds of solo RPGs are there? You mentioned journaling RPGs versus art
Mhm.
RPGs. Are there combat RPGs as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Iron Sworn, like, I would call a journaling RPG, but that's definitely more of a traditional Dungeon Dragon style. Like, you are going and doing your quest, you're not going to be writing down every moment that passes in that game. At least I
Yeah.
don't. Whereas ones like, my Apothecaria games, that's a lot more journaling focused. That's you write the story bit by bit, pace by pace. Uh, and then yeah, you get art RPGs. You get ones that are more just like solo games. I remember playing one where you're playing as bees exploring a hex grid. It was a very cute little game, and it was just about scoring points by finding flowers.
That's really cute.
I'm trying to
Really
think of
cute.
ones outside of that. I mean, like
I
the
saw.
Wretched is like an audio journal you create through it.
Oh yes, I saw this one.
Hmm.
It looks amazing. That's the one with the kind of podcast style listen along track, right?
Yeah, yeah, it does
Yeah.
have that. Yeah, so you got your
Amazing.
Jenga tower, you've got your horror music, and with every result, you're recording it and trying not to shake your table while you do so.
Amazing. I saw there's one called Rune, which is quite combat focused. There's like a square
Yeah.
grid, and you
Mhm.
it's kind of D&D in many
Yep.
ways. Kind of you roll on a roll table for how the bad guys, the skeletons and whatever, how they react, and then you
Yeah.
react accordingly. So
Yeah,
it,
Rune's
it
fun.
really feels like a traditional RPG, but solo, essentially.
Yeah. Mhm.
So yeah, there's like a lot of different kinds. And if you're really into maps or you're really into art, if you're really into maps and art, by the way, check out Delve, which Anna made, which is essentially a dungeon crawling digging game where you draw everything that you find, which is really
Yep.
cool. Um, but yeah, if you're into writing, if you're into art, if you're into, audio, if you're into combat, you will be able to find a solo RPG that is going to suit you because there's such a wide range of them. I think that's something that really surprised me when I first got into solo RPGs, when I first started reading
Mhm.
about them, is that there is this sort of incredible richness. What's the most surprising solo RPG you've seen so far?
Hmm. I think maybe the one that got me into it, the artifact,
Mm.
because in that you're playing as a magical object. It's a story of like abandonment and dealing with like the passing of time and how you kind of break down over the centuries. That
Oh.
was that was the first one I played because I had to review it for Tabletop Gaming Magazine. And I was playing it when my partner and I had moved to Manchester. She was then away in Africa doing a safari for university, and I was at home, like on my own in a new city. And I'm like, "Oh, I'll play this game." And it's like, "Don't play if you're on your own." It's like, but it's a solo RPG. But yeah, like I'm glad it had that warning because yeah, Mousehole Press Artifacts is so great at getting you to explore those feelings to the point where you need a hug after it.
Oh.
And then just cry into your partner's arm, your friend's arm, or any a stranger in the subway, and be like, "It's just my axe. It's so sad."
I find it not incredible is the wrong word. Awesome. I find it awesome that solo RPGs have such an exquisite power to touch us because
Mhm.
unlike a really good novel, which can move you, these are very sophisticated pieces of writing, but they're writing that you interact with on a very personal level, aren't they?
Mhm. Definitely, yeah.
John Leslie says Echo is a time traveling game that uses the year day planner, jumping between time of year.
Yeah. Yeah, I've not played
Another
that one yet, but I have seen it. It's on my list.
another shout out. Somebody else shouted out Microscope as um,
Mhm.
an idea. Playing
I see
Microscope
exquisite biomes
solo.
as well.
Yeah, exactly. Quest character says Dazzly Cat. Another solo RPG there being shouted out.
Mm.
So, what kind of concepts work best for a solo RPG? What do you think? What do you think is kind of the best kind of fit for a solo RPG? We've talked about this sort of incredible
Mhm.
range.
That's kind of like asking what's the best concept for a book. I think it definitely comes down to player preference. I've seen so many different RPGs, like in my position as a reviewer. Like, I remember Lichcraft being one of the most out there examples where you're playing as a transgender person on the UK gender clinic list, and
Oh
the
God.
only way to get seen is to become a lich and survive long enough, like the hundreds of years long it is, which is true. Uh,
Oh man. That yeah, that hurts me. Yes, I know
so
this to be the case.
yeah. So yeah, so like you can make it out of anything. Even just in like my little library behind me, like I've done witches, I've done dwarf strongholds. Friend of mine, Fiona from Sleepy Sparrow Games, did one. We were running a radio station in a post-apocalyptic Scotland,
Wow.
uh, and yeah, so like even beside me, I've got one that's like inspired by like oh, who's that Greek hero that travels for 40 years?
Odysseus.
Odysseus. It's inspired by
Yeah.
that. These stars will guide you home. Trying to find a new
Oh.
like homeland among the islands.
You know, if he'd
At
been,
least I
been a
believe
woman,
that's
he'd
what
have
it's
asked
inspired
for.
by.
Sorry, I was just going to make a crack and say, if he'd been a woman, he'd have asked for directions and been home in a year.
Very true.
Sorry, forgive me. That was terrible. Um, yeah. So basically, what I'm hearing is the kind of concept that works best for solo RPG is anything that catches your
Yep,
fancy and makes you excited.
definitely.
I love that. What are some of the limitations of the solo RPG as a form? Because
Mhm.
obviously, not everything can do everything. You know, we've been
Yeah,
talking about novels before. It's very hard to do music in novels, unless you have an audiobook. What are the limitations of solo RPGs, in your opinion?
I think some of the limitations of them is you can't do secrets all that well. So like it's very hard. There's probably a solution to it, but something I've struggled with is you can't put something in the game and be like, oh, don't tell the players
Mm,
because they have access to the full book.
interesting.
So you kind of have to have that trust between you and the player to be like, hey, we both know this is coming, but act like you don't.
Interesting.
Um, Apart from that, like, yeah, I think it's like secrets and surprise can be hard to generate. I think if your game is built around it, you can certainly
Yeah.
manage it. But I think there's also difficult sometimes to kind of give the player the same amount of surprise they would get in a normal like 4-player, 5-player RPG.
Sure, it's very hard to have that kind of like, aha, surprise, reveal, blah,
Yeah,
moment. Yeah,
without
that
it
makes
feeling generated.
yeah, that makes total sense. What about things like generating twists and randomness and that kind of thing? Is that something that you feel the mechanics of a deck or a
Yeah,
dice do well?
yeah, I feel like you can definitely generate surprise, and like different players will enjoy that to different levels. Like anyone who plays my games knows, like it's all about emergent narrative. So like the book's
Yeah,
laid out the same for everyone, but the order that you draw the cards is going to change it up completely, and how you interpret it changes up completely. But
yeah.
yeah, introducing cards I think was definitely the right choice because it gives you so many options without being too overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the trick as well, isn't it? Is like enough choice, but not too much.
Yeah,
Nice. What are some of your favorite design tools and tricks for solo RPGs? Like what are the things that you find yourself coming back to again and again as you're designing?
I keep coming back to kind of roguelike video game design with
Mm,
that idea of like how do you create an event that can be triggered again and again and again without stumping the player, like without becoming like, oh yeah, I've had this one, I'm like, I remember this. And it was Jason Newbark. I'm awful at names. Nowhere Profits designer, a trench coat full of goblins. Like he made these like wonderful games, and basically it was talking about Nowhere Profit, which is a roguelike video game. If you make something that is too memorable, the player's going to remember it every single time it comes up. So all the events I make for my games try and stay beneath that, so that when they come up, you're like, oh wait, I can adjust this. Oh wait, I've not had that one. And then you look back 20 pages and go, oh wait, yeah, that's great.
I
I
love
think
that.
that's the only thing I come back to like consistently though. That and like Affinity Publisher. That's my design thing, but I think that's more of a tool rather than a interesting tricks.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So I love the idea that in a way, you kind of have to keep things a little bit more meta so
Yeah.
that it can be reinterpreted and reimagined by the player again and again. Is that the idea
Yes.
there?
100%.
What would be some examples of that? So, let's say in your game Apothecaria, for those who don't know, in Apothecaria, you play a witch who is a friendly herbal healer, um, who basically once a week somebody rocks up to your cottage and says, "Help! I have some improbable but wonderfully hilarious punny disease." It's very light, very cozy, and you have to go and find the reagents to make a potion to cure them. That's
Mhm.
kind of the essence of the RPG. I haven't misrepresented that, right?
But no, that's absolutely correct.
That's very much how it felt to me. Like that's the
Yeah.
kind of fun we're having, as we say often on this channel. But as part of that, you get to go into the village and you get to go out and explore and this kind of thing. So within
Mhm.
that context, what's an example of something where you you tried to make it meta enough that it could be reimagined in multiple ways every time it came up on the cards?
hmm So, like looking at some of the kind of examples as they're written, uh, you get things like you find some bore tracks leading straight to a reagent, draw a card, and treat it as a plant reagent of the same value. Like that itself is a very unmemorable event,
Yeah.
but depending on what's just came before or what comes after, you're going to start thinking about, how does that link in? So if you get that, and then you get a group of thieving fairies grab your forage basket and take off into the woods faster than you can run, you start thinking like, wait, did these little fairies have little sandals with boar tracks on the bottom, and this was an ambush? Have they laid a trap for me and they've nicked my basket with the plant regent? So yeah, that's a perfect example is like emergent narrative. It's what I build all my games around.
Amazing. And as the player, your role is to draw the cards, see the actions in the tables, and then
hmm
interpret that into, as you said, the emergent narrative.
Yes.
Interpret that into, this is the story that my character has experienced. And really, you are very much the storyteller and the player
Yeah.
working on the prompts that are presented by the book.
Exactly. Yeah. Writer,
Hey, it's a
director, actor, all in one.
scene designer,
Yep.
theatre of the mind's eye, all of that thing. Oh my god, fairies with ball prints. AP has already been inspired. I know that AP is a massive fan.
Yep.
Um, he's created a public journal on World Anvil for Apothecaria of his playthrough. I know several people
Fantastic.
have. And he says, protect the wigfish. The wigfish has a very special place in AP's heart.
Yes. Yep. I don't
So,
know if it's AP, but I know someone came to me at the UK Games Expo with a Protect the Wigfish pin. They were meeting up with friends to basically petition me, like in game.
amazing. I love it. Um, what are some of the common design pitfalls to watch out for when you're approaching solo RPGs? So every form has things that you want to be careful of.
Mhm.
What is that for solo RPGs? Where do you see? You don't have to name any names. We're not here to dish any dirt. We're just here to inform and learn. What are some of the design pitfalls that you've experienced or that you've seen in other solo RPGs where you've been like, "Ha, I recognize that. That one's a trap that you can fall into."
Yeah, so I think similar to like how I was saying, I try and keep the events going kind of slightly beneath that level of
Yeah.
too unique. I think some people can create events in their games, like journaling prompts that are too specific. They
Mm.
give it's like writing prompts on Reddit sometimes, where it's like 16 lines, where there's a good idea in there, but they're like, oh my god, so like you come across this magical sword and it glows red and its name's Bargamax and it really wants you to take it down to the local bakery and buy it a patisserie roll. What type of patisserie roll do you buy it? And it's like, but I wanted to meet the sword. So yeah, it's definitely there's been some games. I can't think of their names right now where it's been either too specific and you have no freedom as a player,
Yeah.
or they've not given you any information. And I won't name names, but there's one game that I think of in particular when I say that it was just like, hey, there's some adventures +2 this, and it's like, cool, but what do I do with that information?
Yeah. So it's like, where is my flavor,
Yeah,
essentially?
there's a sweet spot, and I think the common design pitfall to watch out for is not hitting that sweet spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever see issues with mechanics in solo RPGs where it just doesn't quite satisfy?
100%, yeah. I
Yeah.
think sometimes with mine.
I
I
mean, I haven't experienced that, but okay.
I Delve is my baby. Everyone loves Delve when they play it, but it's mechanically very dense because I had a page limit of like 48 pages, and I wanted to fit essentially Dwarf Fortress into that. So a lot of those mechanics, like you can do this and this and this, and people are like, okay, but slow down. You're very excitable, and I want a tutorial. Which is something I should sort out.
How about matching mechanics to game style? Like, do you have any tips in that space where you feel like maybe a certain kind of mechanic works for a certain mood, but not for another mood?
Yeah, definitely. Knowing kind of how much mechanical density your target audience wants really matters. Like again, Delve and Apothecaria are great examples. Delve is aimed at like Dwarf Fortress players. They're used to very detailed systems, very like mechanically heavy games. Apothecaria is more of a like writing prompt. It's inspired by like Theme Hospital and Studio Ghibli films. So like it's trying to be funner and quicker. So a lot of the mechanics got pulled right down. Like there used to be like what do you call it? Like regents would go off. So you had to track that. There was a bunch of things like wait at first, and I just cut all of those things out, and I'm like, we'll just make this as simple as possible. And I think that was definitely the right choice to go for.
So there's we talk a lot about the meta on World Anvil, which is kind of like the vision of what you're trying to achieve, the tone, the mood, the ideal audience, the player agency. It sounds like aligning, making sure your rules and your weight and your grit
Yes.
are aligning to your meta and your vision is something that's really critical.
100%, yeah.
Do you have any tips for making that happen?
I think if you have friends who you know are in your target audience, like show them your basic product. Like before you like polish and stuff, just be like, hey, here's my idea, here's the kind of mechanics I'm going with. And if you have something they can play, and you can look over their shoulder and be like, oh, they are like groaning at this mechanic. So can I reduce this in some way?
I love that. That
Yeah,
actually
like,
leads me to my next question, which is about playtesting solo RPGs. So first of all, how important is playtesting a solo RPG, would you say?
I think it depends on what you're going for. Like, if you're going for something that's very narrative focused, it's like very much just, hey, this is some writing prompts. It's going to take you through an experience and some emotions, like Thousand Year Old Vampire. The playtesting can be very short. That could just be you. But if you're trying to make something much bigger, like Ironsworn or my game for small creatures such as we, then you need to definitely give it quite a few months of just putting it out to the community and being like, hey, break this, because there are systems that can be broken and it will ruin people's fun if they come across it and it doesn't work.
Yeah. How would you say that playtesting is different for solo RPGs than it is for other kinds of traditional RPGs, group RPGs?
I think in traditional RPGs, you always have a referee. So the GM can stand there and go, yeah, like technically that's how it's written, but that's not how we're going to work it because that would break this. But for a solo RPG, you hand that to the player and they might not be used to being a GM. They might not have any like game design experience or anything. So they're just using what you've given them. And like that can really taint the experience to be like, oh, cool. So this says I can give myself whatever I want. I'll take 10,000 gold. Oh, wait, the rest of the game doesn't make any sense now.
So I guess, and this is something I noticed you did really nicely in Apothecaria, putting in those player hints where it's like, try and do this or it'll be less fun. So one of the things was where you have the freedom, don't just give yourself the items because then you'll have less fun later on.
Yes. Yeah, I wanted it to be as open as possible for players. So like I wasn't stepping on their toes when it came to their narrative, but also giving the advice like, don't cheat yourself out of it.
Yeah. I love that. I thought I would share, by the way, that Secondhand Samurai, who also, by the way, was the person who came up to tell you save the wigfish, played Delve, and his 5 dwarves tried to set up a fast food mine with monster burgers.
Fantastic.
I thought you needed to know.
Yeah, that's great. We're actually I can't say anything about that. Never mind.
Sounds like a secret thing just passed through your
mind. A secret thing nearly came out because I'm terrible at keeping secrets.
No worries. Okay, I will not press you. Let's move on. Actually, one of the things I wanted to ask was exactly what you mentioned when you were talking about common pitfalls. Apothecaria has this beautiful vibe. It's cozy fantasy. It's got this really rich lore. And one of the things that I felt you really nailed in it was balancing the creation of rich lore, yet still leaving space for players to create and add on and build. Do you have any advice on that? Any secret sauce on that for, finding that locus where the
Mhm.
the creator and the player meet in balance?
Yeah, thank you. It's really nice to hear that. Uh, yeah, it's a difficult one to give advice on because Apothecaria came from an RPG like campaign that me and my partner ran together. So like I have my own idea of what all of the setting looks like,
Yeah.
but when I was creating Apothecaria, it was very much like I can give you a very small glimpse of that among these pages. And I think that's all you need to do. It's like people like Dark Souls because all of the lore is hidden through like item descriptions and stuff. By giving people those little tidbits of lore, they're able to create something that's uniquely theirs, like much more to their tastes.
Yeah. One of the things I always say is that world building should either be in motion, that is to say, part of the action, or it should
Hmm.
be emotional, that is to say, part of the emotional content of the plot and the things that are happening to the
I
character.
like that.
And I think for me, as a writer as well, like as a game designer, when I was writing The Dark Crystal, there was so much information that I had about the setting and so many visions that I had, and I had to fit it in a tiny allowed at the top of each adventure. Um, and so again, like the only way I could satisfy in my word count the putting in all the world was to make
Hmm.
it either in motion, like put it into the objects and into the characters and the NPCs, or make it emotional, so really work it into the things that happen, the cogs that I'd set up to work in each scene.
Hmm.
um and it sounds like, as a novelist it's the same. You can't do an expo dump. You have
Yeah,
to work it into dialogue and overheard things and tapestries on the
exactly.
walls. It
It's
sounds
that
like
we were like, yeah, just one little mention of something is going to spark more interest than 20 pages of like detailed, like, this is exactly what this is.
yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot to be had there in interesting names as well.
Hmm.
I think one fascinating name can get a player more excited than, as you said, 20 pages of lore.
Yeah. And even like introducing things that make the player go, wait, what? And letting them like work out exactly what that means.
Yeah.
Like for the next Apothecaria expansion, it's all about seasons.
Oh,
And if you
nice.
go into Blastfire Bog, spoilers, during winter, you'll find goblins that are struggling to freeze themselves. And like you have to help them freeze themselves for winter. Or in spring, you find
Interesting.
them struggling to thaw. And there's no explanation of why they do this. So it's entirely up to the player, like, what, why?
I love that. I love that. I'm feeling a lot of species articles coming out on World Anvil about, the goblin, frozen hibernation cycle or something. I'm here for it. I think that's awesome. Um, Amazing. I love that. Um, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to try their hand at designing a solo RPG for the first time? Like, where would you recommend people start that journey?
So thankfully, I've actually got experience with this. As I was saying, my friend made her radio RPG.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
so originally, when we started sitting down to talk about it, it was her first game design or solo RPG design, and we were talking about it. She was originally wanting to make something like the ground itself, but as we were talking, it's like, wait a minute, you have an award-winning radio show about this like nuclear apocalypse in Scotland. Why not use what you know? And that's the advice I'd give anyone. If you've got some sort of interest that you think other people would share, go for that. Like, I like to create things, and I know other people like to create things, so all my games are about creating. If you want to be funny, make a game that's funny. And start very small. Don't rush off and try and make Starforged. That is way too much to handle on your first go or your third go, as I've discovered.
Amazing. I know that you have a whole swathe of RPGs next to you. You were showing them to me just before we kicked off.
Yes.
Would you like to share some of your favorites to give our audience a little bit of inspiration or
Yes,
some of the
definitely.
things they could research if they're thinking, oh, I might like to try this.
hmm Yeah, if you're wanting to create a journaling RPG, Thousand Year Old Vampire is the gold standard, in my opinion. Such a simple mechanic. You're rolling a d10 and a d6 and subtracting the latter from the former. And that
Nice.
moves you through these writing prompts.
What
There's
is the
mechanics that. Hmm?
Oh, sorry. What is the kind of general premise? Do you play a
Oh,
1,000-year-old
yes,
vampire?
you are playing as a vampire as you age throughout the centuries. You
Wow.
can start anytime you want, and the prompts are generic enough that they can be applied to any time period, which
Nice.
is probably harder done than you'd think.
Mm,
I've definitely noticed it with some of the games I've been making, trying to make prompts that apply to all manner of potential players.
yeah. So you can play a French Revolutionary vampire, or you can play a
Mhm.
medieval vampire, or you can play a,
Stone
cyberpunk
Age,
vampire.
yep, whatever you like. Uh,
Incredible.
oh, thank you, Secondhand Samurai. Immediately in there for links.
Yeah.
Uh, Lichdom is one that I've really enjoyed. It's a very similar feeling, except you're playing as a lich trying to, or a sorcerer trying to gain lichdom,
Nice.
which means it's probably a great prequel to Lichcraft.
I love that.
Ooh. I've also got Starforged and the original Ironsworn. These are the like big proper Dungeon Dragon style RPGs where it's like you have full character classes and skill trees and all manner of like traits and perks and stuff that you can pick up. I'm
So
half dreading
Ironsworn,
getting more recommendations from
yeah.
ASAP.
So Ironsworn is more of a fantasy one,
Yes.
and then it's Starforged. It's called, right?
Yeah. Ironsworn Starforged is the Star Trek, Star Wars inspired one.
Amazing. Really cool. And what do you like about those?
For like Starforged and for Ironsworn, the fact like you can take all that GM effort you put in and you can make something that's just for you. So, you get to go explore it. But the book itself acts as a GM with one of the most
Mhm.
robust oracle tables, which means basically
Oh,
you ask it a question and then randomly determine the answer.
very cool.
Uh, for Lichdom and Thousand Year Old Vampire, it's like having a co-writer sitting next to you, and you're like creating this story. And I mean, for Thousand Year Old Vampire, like I consider myself a very happy-go-lucky person, and
Yeah.
yet, Vampire was like, but wouldn't it be great if we were awful? Like, just you know, you could put in a small like character like that you raise from a child, and then kill and take their place. Wouldn't that be really interesting? And I'm like, I wouldn't have come up with that on my own ever. It's so outside of like my brain. That really amazed me to like what these games can accomplish.
That's wonderful. That's really cool. And I think that that's one of the real appeals to them is that you get to kind of live that completely alternate experience in a very
Mhm.
safe space where nobody else can judge you.
Exactly. Yep.
So yeah, you could do horrible things to your heart's content. I will say though, I've seen a lot of people do solo journaling RPGs on live streams, which is a really interesting
Mhm.
twist for something that is a kind of solo experience, maybe even a meditative or a private experience, to do that as a kind of public thing to let streamers in. How do you feel about
Yeah,
that?
I think it's amazing because I think it's harkening back to like the idea of like storytellers around campfires coming up with like myths and legends. I think it's amazing that people are finding a new release for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I've really loved is because it's so open and so personal, you can take advice from the chat so they can suggest things like, oh,
Yeah,
what if that's connected to this, or what if it was this all along, and it's almost like having a Greek chorus for your story where they're suggesting connections and telling
yep,
telling the story in a parallel way.
yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting social approach. So if you are a streamer or if you've been thinking of streaming, um, solo RPGs and journaling RPGs can be a
Mhm.
really successful way of doing that. And again, there's a lot of World Anvil worlds that are, worlds that are interpretations of these stories where, they've created articles to explore the reagents they've created, journal entries in things like Heroes, where you can plan your
Mhm.
character and update them session by session. So there, yeah, there's, if you're interested in streaming, there's a lot there to enjoy. I've got an intriguing question here from Cedra Honnett, who asks, when writing a solo RPG game, how do you know if you have a full game or just a set of alternative rules to a pre-existing game?
Hmm. I suppose, like, if you feel that you have created an entire gameplay loop from scratch, so like, this is how the player starts, this is what the player needs to do, and this is how the player succeeds, then that's a full game. But if you feel like it needs something else to prop it up, like, say you're wanting to make a Wretched and Alone style game, you want to use the Jenga tower, you want to use their like card draw systems, then yeah, like that is just alternative rules, and they're both equally as important, like both equally valid.
What for
Uh,
you? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry, yeah.
I
On you
was
go.
going to ask, what for you are the differences between cards versus dice versus the Jenga tower in terms of what they give the game?
I think cards and dice are very similar
Yeah.
because it's all just a random number generator. I chose cards purely for the fact like you can get them out of any corner shop here,
Yeah.
so anyone can have cards, whereas not everyone can get a hold of a D20.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to let people outside of the RPG communities get into these games as well. But in saying that, I do believe sometimes you want a D20. Like for small creatures such as we, you generate your characters like backstories, but
Yeah.
it couldn't work nicely with D6s, and it became such a headache to the point I was like, I just want to make a D18 and put it out there. But yeah, those are just random number generators, and I think cards can be easier to remember where you were. So like if you intend for the game to be very short, like play sessions, or for people to play without worrying about getting interrupted, they can just put the card in the book where they were as a bookmark.
I
But
love that.
the Jenga tower, like that adds tension. That's it's a commitment, and it's very much like you're going to sit here, you're going to play this game, and you're going to be scared, or you're going to be feeling whatever kind of tension you're aiming for, because you could, like Star-Crossed Lovers, do it for relationships as well.
Yeah. Love
Uh,
that.
I actually made a game that was using pop-up pirates.
What a cool idea. I love that. So for those of you who don't know pop-up pirates, these are little roundy, cute, chibi pirate figurines that you push down and then you stab swords in the bottom, right? And then
Yep.
eventually one of them pops up.
Yep. Yeah, that's on my
Amazing.
edge for free.
I love that. And folks, you can find a whole bunch of Anna's games over on her itch. I know that Secondhand Semi has been sharing that that link in the chat all the way through. I think I've not seen one, but I bet there is one. A solo RPG with tarot cards. I'm sure
Oh,
that
there's
somebody has made this.
lots, hundreds.
Yeah, I
Like
figured.
it seems to be a flip of the coin whether people use cards or tarot cards. And it's very much if you want to give your game a more mystical feel, then tarot cards are a good choice.
Yeah.
I avoided using them because I've got a friend who believes very much in the like religious aspect of them, so I didn't want to like upset him in any way. So I decided to stick purely with playing cards.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I've seen, and again, you are much more experienced with solo RPGs than me, but one of the things I've seen is that cards give you the advantage that there's both the number and also the suit.
Mhm.
So it gives you a couple of different variables within a single draw. And
Yeah.
there's also the hierarchy, I think, in cards that you get less in dice. There's the jack, the queen,
Yep.
and the king. So there's almost this like, well, there is this anthropomorphization. So, if you see the queen, something, I don't know, queenie happens. If you see the king, something kingy happens. Like if you see the
Mhm.
jack or the knave, something mischievous like there is that chance for personification that you
Definitely.
lose, I think, from a dice.
Mhm. And yeah, that personification is what draws a lot of people to tarot cards as well, because then you get
Yeah.
a lot of context from the cards themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the other things, as you mentioned, it's got that mysticism in it, that kind of depth and mysteriousness for a lot of people.
Mhm.
But also, there's the factor of the art, which is always is quite dramatic, which,
Yeah.
I have never seen chibi tarot cards. I'm sure somebody has drawn
Oh
them,
yeah,
but I have
definitely.
never seen chibi cat tarot cards. The expectation of tarot cards is that they're fairly dramatic, so I feel like
Mhm.
there's that drama as well. If you there's no devil on the dice, right? There's no
Yeah.
um there's no judge on the
Mhm.
dice. There's no death on the dice.
Yeah, they're quite
So
removed in a sense.
yeah. Yeah. So tarot is sort of super dramatic and meaningful,
Mhm.
right? Even if you don't you know have a connection to that more religious aspect of it.
Yeah. I believe there's someone did make a mod of Apothecaria that uses tarot
Mm.
cards.
Oh, interesting.
Hey, Rich.
Thanks for weighing in, Hatchling Games, who says, lovely seeing it, Anna, on here. We make sure to meet up every UK Games Expo.
Yep. And
Nice.
if my camera was pointed down at the mess, you would see In Spirals by Hatchling Games, which is all about teaching
Nice.
sign language through RPGs, which is so cool.
Oh, that is so cool. Ah, Hatchling Games. Maybe you'd like to come on and talk to us about that sometime. That's something I would love to learn more about, and I bet my beans would as well. Um, there's just so many cool people in the RPG space. I'll never stop saying it. Just so many awesome people. It's great. I love it. Um, I did want to ask. Here we go. A lot of people may have been listening to, the solo RPGs chat that we've been having, and thinking, this seems reminiscent of choose your own adventure.
Mhm.
What do you think is the relationship between solo RPGs and choose your own path or choose your own adventure books?
I think it's. I think for solo RPGs, like we were saying earlier, you are the writer and the player, the GM and the player. But in a choose your own adventure, you're just the player. I think they're both great ways to spend your time, and I actually do plan to write a choose your own adventure later in the year. But I think they do actually inhabit very different niches because of that like interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen some quite involved choose your own adventure games where,
Hmm.
you can accrue gold and points and spend it, and like
Yeah.
they can get quite involved, but there is always that conceit at the end of the day that you are choosing pre-made choices and
Yes.
somebody else behind the curtain is running the show, even if they're not in the room with you.
Yeah.
Do you have any
Because yeah,
advice?
there's
Oh, sorry.
yeah, because there's a limit on how far a choose your own adventure can go, especially in print. Like you can't let the player just go off randomly down whatever hole they choose. But in a solo RPG, there's a bit more room to do that.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for creating that freedom in solo RPGs from stepping away from that choose your own adventure feel?
Mhm.
Because the reason I ask this, to give context, is I feel a lot more people are familiar with choose your own adventure, and that might be where they default to. So I feel
Yeah,
like this is a really important step to consider when you're starting out with solo RPGs.
yeah. So it's definitely like if you're making a solo RPG and you're coming from a choose your own adventure background, it's think about it like you have Firetop Mountain, but you don't want to guide the player through it. You want them to create their own Firetop Mountain. You
Yeah.
want like what do you discover? Let them find it out themselves.
Yeah. So it's in many ways it really is a choose your own adventure in a much more true way than
Yeah,
choose your own adventure book.
make your own adventure. Meow.
Yeah. Write your own adventure.
Hmm.
Whoa, whoa.
We are.
Wyoa. I swear I will not jump off a mountain after saying that. Oh, it sounds like I would. Well, speaking of awesome things, I know that you have some awesome things coming. What's in the works for you? We have mentioned small creatures such as we.
Yeah,
Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that?
yeah. So for small creatures such as we was my Kickstarter project for Zine Quest in 2022. And it got wildly out of hand. It was meant to be a zine, it was meant to be 60 pages, but we got a lot of stretch goals. And then I sort of went, you know what? I want to make a sci fi epic and let you do anything. So it's now about 250 pages.
Holy
Uh,
moly.
yeah. But that's it's inspired by like Becky Chambers' Wayfarer series. It's meant to be this story of you're a human captain getting these alien crewmates for the first time that you generate, and you learn about them and like build up their culture, their biology, their behaviors as you work together. Uh, that has taken a long time to make. So in the meantime, like that's coming out. We've also got Shire Folk, which is my like Hobbit Shire with the like IP filed off. Uh, it's along the same lines as Apothecaria, the same like if you played that, you'd be familiar with like the card draws, the events, and the journaling. But it's also got a delve style Hobbit hole or burrow making mechanic, and it like really plays into the whole you are a shireling, you need to take care of your outfit, you need to take care of your reputation, uh, exactly hobbit sim. uh, you need to take care of guests that come to your house and eat your food. uh, and we've also got golf quest coming out this year, which was last year's zine quest game, which is
Amazing.
there was an old like school game called pencil golf where you draw a little golf course, you take the pencil, put your finger on the end and like flick it to make your shot. uh, and my partner showed me that late 2022 and I was like, oh, I've never seen this before, this is amazing, and immediately started this idea of a fantasy golf game. So we've been making all these like cool courses based on the Apothecaria locales.
Oh,
So like,
fun. What a great idea.
yeah, it's all tied together. Even my upcoming novel is all tied to Apothecaria.
Exciting.
Uh, and yeah, so we're excited to get that out. There's like loads of courses. That's you can play it solo, but it's going to be aimed for multiplayer as well.
Oh, nice. Okay, so there's like different options there.
Yeah,
Very
as with for small creatures, is going to have a co-op mode. Because we noticed with Apothecaria, which is the rodent spin-off of Apothecaria, that letting people join together and play it as a team was really helping people to not get overwhelmed in some cases.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I think there's a lot of very wholesome solo RPGs, and I feel like collab makes a lot of sense within that space, if you see what I mean.
Yep,
How do you
definitely.
how have you approached designing a game that is solo but also for many? Because that's a challenge often.
Yeah, a lot of the time, like with my designs, I try and make it so there's not as much competition,
Yeah.
which means like it's like you're not here to make the best character. You're not trying to be the strongest. You're not overshadowing anyone. It's very much hey, here's a nice little experience, and here's some simple rules. So like we write it usually as solo, and then for the multiplayer version, we'll just be like, in order to keep this fair, like up these values, lower these values. Someone was asking in the chat, I think it was Hey It's AP, about I do a multiplayer like game of normal Apothecaria with my partner, and it's like it's not designed for that, but we just play it as if our two witches are always together,
Aw,
or we like
love
divide
that.
the timer between each of us.
I love that. That's so sweet. Are you going to release rules for that? Because I feel like that might be something a lot of people are excited
I
about.
think I should like probably just for free. I'll put it up on like Discord or something at one point because it is to really just divide the timer amongst you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea. I think that's absolutely beautiful. Um, yeah. Amazing. So it sounds like you have so many projects in the works. Would you like to tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
your upcoming novel, or is that something that's secret for now?
Oh no, I'd love to talk about that. So it's called Wolf and Fang Detective Agency: The God Thief.
Ooh,
It's about a female werewolf and a female vampire who are in a relationship. They were both city guards together and have went to form their own detective agency. And their first kind of big case is about a statue is stolen from the Temple of Forgotten Gods in a way
oh,
that it should not have been able to be stolen.
interesting.
Yeah, and it's about their following that case.
Very interesting indeed. That sounds amazing. Is that still being written? Is that coming out soon?
It's still being written. It's nearly there. It's like I did NaNoWriMo, so it's like 220 pages. I'm in the third act now, so editing hopefully be out later this year.
Incredible. I love it. Um, okay, I have a few audience questions for you quickly. One of them is
Yeah.
simply, Anna, how are you, sister?
Oh, thank you so much.
And one from AP who asks, you have an Apothecaria playthrough with your partner, how do you balance a solo game with another player? Okay, so we kind of
Yeah,
covered that one already. You said you changed the timer so that you split
yeah,
it between the two of you,
yeah.
or you're
Divide it
together,
thoroughly
correct?
or stay together. Yeah,
I love
and
that.
just treat it as if you're playing it alone, but like mechanically, but just change the narrative up.
Yeah, that makes sense. How do you manage the journaling? Like, how do you document your process? Do you do that together? Do you like how
Yeah,
does that work for you guys?
so we role play it back and forwards, and like whoever's kind of the main character of the scene, the other one takes the role of like GM. So
Okay.
we were playing through the Bogle's Night expansion around Halloween.
Ooh,
That's the one where you go
nice.
explore a like creepy castle, a creepy manor, and we kept getting drunk. This patient has been drunk by a vampire,
Yeah.
so we just kept getting this one bard who was in love with a vampire, kept going back to her, kept getting drunk and coming to us, being like, "Ah, why?" So yeah, we just play that out with each other, and then at the end of the session, we just write it all up on one note.
Nice. Really nice. Spinex Knight asks, what are the recommended platforms I can use to play solo RPGs? I tried For the Words, but it's too much time crunching with monster battles. Yeah, that sounds really stressful. For those of you who don't know For the Words, it's very fun, but it's timed, gamified writing sprints,
Oh.
um, which I think is maybe does not give you the space to enjoy a solo
Mhm.
RPG. As I've been saying, World Anvil is has been the platform of choice for a lot of people. It's a space where you can use the journaling tool, you can use the notebooks. A lot of people have been using heroes, so they will create essentially an RPG character or an OC, and then they'll just use the journals to write session after session of their enjoyable experiences. You can do them in a,
Book.
I was going to say,
Yep.
in a physical book if you want to as well.
Yeah. I love getting to use a book because you can draw, you can
Nice.
go outside and like pick flowers and like smush them in. You can make little props to fit in
Aw.
it. So I love the creative aspect of solo RPGs. So where able, I always use physical.
I love that. I am somebody who is very resistant to physical tools. I am very slow at writing. I'm also dyslexic, so I find physical writing and
Mhm.
that kind of thing. It's very ironic. I've written many novels. I'm a professional game designer, so I write as a job. I am
Yep.
very dyslexic. I find physical writing incredibly difficult. So for
Yeah.
me, it's always got to be something digital. That's my happy
Mm.
place. But really, whatever is going to suit you is what's going to be best.
Yeah,
So as I say,
definitely.
many people use World Anvil, but there are also, a lot of other options. You mentioned OneNote, if you
Mhm.
just want a very simple sort of text space, there's a lot of different options. Have you seen other options apart from those?
Uh, I mean, I think it's rude to say Legend Keeper on here as another alternative. Uh, but yeah, like mostly I just use OneNote. I've got a Legend Keeper account because I backed it when it was like first out, and they gave me a
Mhm.
lifetime thing. But I don't use it.
Fair. I'm not allowed to say anything about that.
Yeah,
Or I'm allowed to, but I don't think it would be classy, so I'm not
yeah,
going to.
exactly.
Uh,
Go use World Anvil. I'm sure it's great. I'll be using it after this.
You'll be in good company. We've got so many lovely beans. Danny eventually says, a nice world for solo RPGs, a private world, or a notebook that can be junk journaled. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
I
we've even
will.
had people on Discord using Minecraft
Oh
for
my
Delve.
goodness! Wow. Okay, I mean that makes total sense because it's very visual,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So I will be releasing a blog about solo RPGs and how to play solo RPGs on World Anvil, over on blog.worldanvil.com. So do keep a lookout for that. And I will also make sure that this wonderful interview is pinned there, as well as being available on the YouTube. So you will be able to come back and hear the wonderful, wonderful advice of Anna. Speaking of which, Anna, any final thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with about solo RPGs?
I get this at the end of every interview. It's like, any other questions or thoughts? Uh, yeah, definitely. I see a lot of people talking about like when they want to play solo RPGs and feeling guilty that they're not making enough time for it.
Mm.
And like I think it's the same thing that some people get with writing. And my advice is always just remember this is for fun. Enjoy it. Go into it with an open heart and an open mind.
I love that. If in doubt, enjoy it.
Yeah.
Amazing. And why the freak not? Well, I am afraid, folks, that is all we have time for today. I would like to thank Anna for being an absolute, not just a mine of information, but an absolute pleasure to talk to. Thank you so much for joining us today, Anna.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Oh, it has been our absolute pleasure to have you here. Folks, we will be going on a raid, and our raid shout is Light Up the Forge. So make sure you shout it out when we go over to Strixline, who is going to be streaming right now. I think she is doing her New Year's resolutions challenge, reading through World Anvil articles of others, leaving comments, and thinking about how she wants to share the love this year, do some more world building, art, and all those good things. So do go and check that out. Just before we go, I would like to announce the winner of the first Forge the Future raffle. Now, if you do not know what Forge the Future is, then shame. I say this because it is my January baby. I think the Amazing Secondhand Samurai will share the link, but if you go onto World Anvil, you will see it everywhere. My New Year's resolution is to make World Anvil more freaking awesome. This is something that we focus on every single year, gathering feedback from you guys because we care what you think. We want to make tools for the people who actually use them, and that's you guys. So please, 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 if you would do me one favor, go fill in the form. It'll take 15 minutes of your time. Let me know what's working for you, what's not working for you, what would you love to see next, what are you having issues with. Share, because then I can fix this for you. Yes. And in case that was not enough of an incentive, if you fill in the Forge the Future form, you will get a shiny badge. And also there is a chance that you will win merch, World Anvil memberships, and more. Yes, we are running a raffle for everybody who has submitted every week during January. And today is a winner. I am happy to announce, just put in the chat, is Grace Roseas, chosen randomly from the submitters. So congratulations, Grace Roseas. I will, of course, be emailing you as well. You have won a very fine limited edition World Ember mug. Yes, the beautiful black ones with the flames all over them.
Very nice.
I am drinking from the other one today. That was not very good planning. But congratulations, Grace Roseas. And folks, we will be pulling a winner every single week in January. So if you have not yet submitted, now is the perfect time to do it. You will have more chances to win the earlier you submit. You see what I did there? All right, folks, it's time for me to let Anna go and get a cup of tea. And for all of you to go and join Strix, you know what to do. Shout out, Light Up the Forge. And of course, as we always do on World Anvil, grab your hammer and go world build. Bye, beautiful beans.